Hello and welcome to the Market Advantage NBA podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He is Jason Gobo at JGobo11. Talking about some pricing discrepancies between the two sites, as always. And I'm looking here at some differences. Of course, this first guy, power forward on DraftKings and center on FanDuel. DeMarcus Cousins, $10,500 on DraftKings and $9,800 on FanDuel. Nice price discount for him there. But recently, he's struggled. Could keep his ownership down a little bit. Obviously, been involved in a couple blowouts recently as well, and did come out. And I can't repeat exactly what he used to describe his play, but it was a not very nice word for what he's been doing. So all of a sudden, that cheap price tag on FanDuel makes him a pretty nice GPP play tonight. But until I see him, scoring his James Harden type floor games, he's not a guy I'll be playing cash games anytime soon.
Yeah, I agree with you there, especially tonight with the tough matchup as well. I mean, even though Rudy Gobert's not there, they've still got a pretty tough front court. So I think probably the ultimate GPP move, just because guys like Steph Curry, Paul George are your obvious plays. But Cousins does have a pretty high ceiling if you want to toss him in some tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next up, another guy that I love to target in tournaments, Dwight Howard. $8,100 on FanDuel, only $7,000 on DraftKings, and coming off of one of his better games of the season, 22-18 against Sacramento with 2 blocks, 2 steals, 52.5 fantasy points. Obviously, this isn't a guy who goes out of his way to try and find his offensive shot. It's kind of the putback alley-oop type of opportunities for him, and obviously James Harden's still the focal point. But facing off tonight against Brook Lopez, who no one on earth thinks that Brook Lopez is a good defender, so certainly not a guy that I love in cash games for mostly the reason that he doesn't try to score and due to his price. But I think he's a guy that does have considerable upside still.
Yeah, you got to look back at this last game against the Nets when he went off for 50-plus fantasy points. So definitely has that upside there. And, I think for his price, especially on DK where he's just 7K, I mean, you got to like that, especially with the guys in that range, because Vucevic, you're safe option there, but for the same price, you got to like Howard for upside.
Yeah, absolutely. And then this next guy struggled in a couple of his last games after having a really nice start to the season here. Kevin Love, $8,300 on DraftKings, $77 on FanDuel. Last couple games, I mean, obviously last one, blowout loss to Miami where LeBron James didn't play. But his last three, 16.5, 34, and 20. He's a guy facing off against a Portland front court that is not a great defensive front court at all. And obviously Kevin Love, recency bias, people are kind of saying, I'm done with Kevin Love. I'll see him again, never. GPP only type of guy. But it's still a fine matchup for him. And he did miss shoot-around this morning due to an illness, they're saying. But they say he's expected to play tonight. Still a guy for tonight that would be a GPP only guy for me. But certainly not a guy that I'm just writing off after a couple subpar games.
Yeah, just because he's so kind of reliant on his shot and rebounding because he doesn't do much else. When that shot's not falling, he does have a lower floor, and it's bound to happen. I mean, the guy was shooting lights out before, but I love the matchup tonight. I think he's a pretty safe bet for a double-double, but just the guys in that range, I do think he's more of a tournament play.
Yeah, absolutely. And then next up, we've got Omri Caspi, who apparently drank some water in Mexico a couple games ago and missed that game. That's what everyone was speculating about on Twitter. But he's a guy who's been price considered fairly consistent, a much better play on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. DraftKings $5,000, $4,300 on FanDuel. Facing off against the Utah team that we know, a good defense, but obviously the team defense in itself takes a big hit with Rudy Gobert out right now. So Caspi, a guy I probably won't have much of on DK, but I think he's a really nice option still on FanDuel tonight.
Yeah, I'm with you there, especially because small forward, there's not a ton of value, and you got to look at him as probably the only value small forward option.
Yeah, exactly. There's not a whole lot there. One other guy, I think this is the second biggest discount of the day. Victor Oladipo sitting here at $6,600 on DraftKings, 76 on FanDuel. And he's a guy who obviously coming off the bench now, but he's really thriving in this bench role now. A couple really big games, 2 44-point fantasy point games in his last 4 games, a couple over 30 as well. Now facing off against a Denver team that, another one of those teams among the worst overall defensive teams in the league here. And Orlando, not the type of team that's really going to blow anybody out either. So imagine this one will stay close till the end anyway. So Oladipo, bench roll and that price on FanDuel I'm not too excited about. But the fact that he's a pretty high usage guy off the bench and 66 on DraftKings at a week's shooting guard position, I think he's a guy that's in play for me.
Oh, definitely. I like Oladipo. I mean, I've always been a big fan of his just because he's kind of he does it all. I mean, he shoots the ball not extremely well, but he still shoots a ton and racks up rebounds, assists, steals. I mean, he kind of does it all. So I think for 6,600, this is a guy who, I mean, for 4,000 less than Harden, I kind of like that move there.
Yeah, nice contrarian move there to save you a bunch of money if you want to get some other big names. Brook Lopez next up. He continues to be a little bit cheaper on DraftKings. Gap kind of closing, though. 77 on DraftKings, 82 on FanDuel. Obviously going to be matching up down low with Dwight Howard tonight. But did fine against Houston the first time, and he's been one of the most, if not the most consistent, upper-tier center this season. Kind of has that floor in the low 30s, upside into the 50s. I think he's a fine cash game play on slates like this where there's not a lot of centers, at least on the top, that you just feel really good about giving you a nice floor.
Yeah, I always like Brook Lopez for cash games, especially this season. I mean, the guy's been pretty consistent and averaging 2.2 blocks a game, so he's definitely throwing a little defensive game out there this year.
Yeah, a couple guys here for Houston. Clint Capella, 5,500 on DraftKings, 47 on FanDuel. Not a guy that's done a whole lot recently. I mean, he's a guy you could throw in some GPPs because it is a fine matchup at the 4 against Brooklyn, but as long as Dwight Howard's on the court, he's not a guy that I'm going to have much exposure to.
Yeah, me either. I mean, the minutes just haven't been there, even though we have seen some opportunities for him to play 30 minutes, and it just hasn't gone that way.
Yeah. One other guy, like you said, from this same team, Pat Beverly, $4,100 on FanDuel, 47 on DraftKings. And like we've been saying for a week or so, he's the guy that it's a safe bet to get you 20 to 25 fantasy points, and it's a safe bet to say he's not ever really going to get you much more than that. He's a guy that doesn't shoot a ton, but he gets open shots because obviously if you're a defense facing the Rockets, no part of you is worried about what Pat Beverly's doing. You're worried about James Harden, and then you're worried about Dwight Howard down low. And so he gets open looks. He takes them. He's been a fairly decent shooter recently, but not a guy with huge upside, but a nice cash game filler if you need the savings.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a guy who's just going to get you 25 fantasy points at a cheap price, it's Patrick Beverly tonight, and shooting the ball pretty well, especially from 3. Like you said, he's getting open looks, 3 of 4 last game, 4 of 4 the game before, 2 of 5 from 2 games before. So, I mean, he's making them, and I mean, I really like the matchup against anyone facing Brooklyn.
Yeah, absolutely. Brooklyn, a terrible defensive team. So that'll wrap things up for the Market Advantage. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Lots of other great content for you at dailyfantasycafe.com.